Faith.
Thank you very much.
For starters, how are you holding up after the ease of the lockdown now? People are back to walking and public transport is in wave. How are you holding up as SMEs?
So, well, I work with SEATINI. SEATINI is Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Information and Negotiations Institute, and we work with small and medium enterprises. And the work that we do with them is basically to engage with them and also facilitate them to engage government so that they can be able to amplify their voices around the for an enabling environment when it comes to policy, but also the institutional practices. So, for example, the way URA operates or engages with them, the way URSB, but also Uganda Development Corporation, Uganda Development Bank, how can they access finance through that is provided for by government. And like you rightly noted, the SMEs are really struggling when it comes to as a result, when it comes to getting back on their feet as a result of the lockdown and but also COVID-19, because you see there are some SMEs that rely on input from, say, China and basically machinery and a few other intermediate goods. But also there are people who there are those SMEs that rely on importing packaging material. So, for example, the plastic bottles and then the boxes, etc., etc. And so, but also aside from that, now there are even internally there are those SMEs that buy from farmers. So, at the point when the lockdown happened, there was a challenge in as far as transportation is concerned. And we, but also because of the lockdown. So, for example, like schools have been locked down. Locked up, hotels, and a lot. So there are SMEs that make juice that were initially supplying to schools, or where parents were buying from them when they are taking their children back to school or during the visitation period. And then there are hotels. People supply them with soap, people supply them with all kinds of things.
There was a talk about the incentives from the government to practically come to act as more like a trigger to speed bump the people, the SMEs back into business. How are you holding up with the ground? Have these incentives reached the SMEs from your research on ground? Well,
so for us, from the different SMEs that we have been engaging, and these are SMEs that are under, for example, Uganda Small Scale Industries Association, and this is a big association with more than 1,000 different members, and a lot of these SMEs have not been able to access some of the packages that were provided, and we've seen SMEs who have decided to diversify. So, for example, if they were supplying juice to schools and the schools have been locked down all this time, there are those that have diversified into making sanitizer, and but even then they have done it relying either on borrowed money from family or on their own finance.
What are the hurdles to access these facilities, the incentives government promised?
So
is it too much paperwork? Is it
exactly? So when you look at the bureaucracies involved, and number one, the fact that you do not know what information is needed, and so, for example, you don't know if what are some of the requirements, what should my turnover be, because, like, for example, with the Uganda Development Bank, initially it was a wholesale lender, but now the Ministry of Finance proposed that it be restructured. We've not yet got an update on whether this restructuring has actually been completed, whether the different conditions or requirements have been adjusted. So, for example, whether they are now allowing turnover of below $500 million, whether they can accept, say, for example, if I do not have collateral, but I know that I have invoices or memorandums of understanding with my different suppliers. So for example, in supermarkets, if I am supplying a number of supermarkets, can I present that as one of the as some of the paperwork
to get the funds.
Exactly. And so, but also when it comes to the package under taxation, because one of the things that Ministry of Finance proposed was that they were going to allow for tax deferment for the period of March to June. Now, and the deferment was supposed to go on until September. So by September, you should have paid. Now, the
analogy is by September you're stable. You're back to full capacity.
And that's a wrong assumption, because given that there's demand deficiencies, that people are no longer able to purchase certain goods. So, for example, if you are buying certain goods at the moment, then you probably consider them as essential, but now today, because of the reduced disposable incomes among many of us, there are certain products that you have cut out since. And so it has created a very untenable situation for a number of entrepreneurs that their products may not be selling out as much, so even the cash flow then reduces. Yes.
Well, how about talking about doing business or improving business while incorporating the SOPs of Ministry of Health? Has this in any way affected the SMEs by far?
Yes. So, for example, and that's another issue that we raise, because when it comes to SOPs, it requires additional investment. So, for example, if you're going to give your workers masks,
gloves,
exactly. So, if you're supposed to be social distancing, it means you'll either have to reduce on the number of people you're employing, or you're going to have to increase on the space that you're using. So, increasing on space, if you're renting a premise, that means you have to incur more money to get more space. And so these and all are some of the challenges that these entrepreneurs are facing. And one of the concerns that we have is that when you look at the investment policy environment in general, it does not support domestic entrepreneurs.
How doesn't it support it? Because they have been telling us, boo-boo, buy Uganda, build Uganda.
Exactly.
COVID told us to actually buy more of Ugandan products.
Yes, and yes, we welcome the fact that now government is looking at import substitution, because, for example, we've been importing products like honey, and we know that there are
we're importing Irish potato.
Exactly.
This is outrageous.
Yes, it's very concerning. So while government is making an effort to implement the import substitution strategy, more needs to be done, because it's not just about increasing import duty on products that we are producing, and so to secure more market, but also it's important for government to invest in these entrepreneurs. Uganda Development Corporation, and actually it was very surprising that in the package, Uganda Development Corporation is supposed to the finance provided for them is limited to public-private partnership arrangements. So, for example, a private entity partners with government. Now, the notion under private-public partnerships is that the public sector is supposed to be leveraging on private finance.
Okay.
So, as a small entrepreneur, if you don't have finance,
you cannot thrive.
You cannot be able to partner with government.
I totally agree.
And yet, what government should be doing is getting into the businesses of these guys and seeing and financing them to improve
far better.
Yes.
Wow. So, Faith, in that way, if you could address yourself to government, what advice would you give in regards to incentives to the businesses that they can grow, and can we even afford that as an economy as of now? Can the government say we're going to bring this much investment in the SMEs and they bounce back to life? What advice would you give to government? Because now you're dealing with them from the ground.
Yeah, so there are a number of proposals that these entrepreneurs have put forward. So, for example, number one, the government is putting in place a number of industrial parks. and in these industrial parks, but also free zones. So, for example, under free zones, you're supposed to import, if you're importing anything that you want to use within your operation, you import it duty-free. Okay, so there are limitations also, that if you're operating under an industrial park, then whatever you're producing, you have to export 80% of it and only allow for 20% to be on
within.
Yes, we have entrepreneurs who we are working with who actually export 80% of what they produce.
Okay.
Now, that is one. But also the other one is to do with the incentives. Government has given out a lot of incentives to the taxpayers who have the capacity to pay. So, for example, multinational corporations,
they are given a lot of subsidies as compared to...
They are given tax exemptions for even up to 25 years. And the small entrepreneurs, while under the income tax Act, government provides that if you are exporting 80% of what you're producing, then you should be entitled to
the same
a tax exemption, an income tax exemption. But small entrepreneurs are not benefiting from this.
Have you tried to drum this before the government and the powers that be?
Yes.
Have they responded, and how have they responded?
Yes, and so, for example, under Uganda Investment Authority, the argument is that, oh, they need to come and register with us. Yeah?
Okay.
And then under URA, oh, they need to get a tax advisor.
They need to be compliant.
They need, yes, okay, compliance, because they are compliant.
Yes.
And the first question we ask is, are you compliant? And then we see, and yes, they are compliant. So at URA, you're told, or you need to get a tax advisor, because the tax advisor is the one who knows all the nitty-gritties that pertain to actually being able to access an incentive.
That,
But small entrepreneurs cannot be able to afford a tax advisor because there are so many other expenses that they are incurring on their own individually. So the issue of access to finance needs to be addressed, and the only way it can be addressed is if government actually gets interested in investing in these entrepreneurs, because you can give them a number of conditions. These entrepreneurs today are relying on philanthropists. So investors from abroad come and then they find a good business and they say, okay, I'm going to invest. Now, whatever profit comes out of that would somehow is somehow taken, and so we risk even losing out on our own domestic entrepreneurs, because we are not the ones financing them. And
so Faith, for you, paint for me a picture in the new normal, how the new business, ideal business should be, and how can SMEs thrive through?
So in the new normal, one of the things that we are encouraging these entrepreneurs to do is get on to utilizing the electronic digital marketing, online marketing, because then you can be able to, because online marketing gives you an opportunity also to have this one-on-one engagement with your customer. So but also it can help you. It can help provide share costs, situation. So, for example, there are customers who are willing to say, "Oh, I'll come by and pick my products," as opposed to you going there. And there are so many other benefits that come from using digital marketing. Some of which I may not want to spill over, but it's important that they take advantage of utilizing, but also another is being tax compliant. Because while there are those that are tax compliant, there are those that are actually not. And small entrepreneurs, small and medium entrepreneurs, excuse me, actually struggle when it comes to being tax compliant. And one of the things that they have said is that URA needs to get down to them and provide that aftercare support to help them know, understand what are the different tax requirements, what are their different obligations. And I mean, if we are talking about domestic resource mobilization, the only way government will actually be able to increase its collections domestically is if it can get down to somehow have some kind of partnership, yes, as opposed to coming into demand,
you're not supporting.
Exactly, and get me as a culprit, and yet I may not even be knowing what some of the requirements are, but also share some of the benefits.
Wow.
Yes.